Fantastic, thank you. Great, okay. Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Erika Giampietro, and I am the Executive Director of the soon-to-be-launched Massachusetts Alliance for Early College. I'll talk more during this session about us and the work that we're planning to do, but I wanted to start here first with our session goals and introduce you to my co-presenters today. This session is about our work in Massachusetts on early college, where we've been and where we're going. As you saw, the title of the session is How a Fast Follower State is Pursuing Early College. Some of you on this call are probably in those states we've followed, and we're grateful to you for the trails that you've blazed. We have reviewed and applied many of your legislative policies and funding structures and governance models, and we've been able to move more quickly because of your good work. And some of you may be in states that are similar to where we were a couple of years ago, believing in the potential of early college and wanting to build out your early college systems and offerings. And for you all, my hope is that this call is a spur for you, similar to how we learned from leading states a few years ago, that you can reflect on our experience in Massachusetts and take with you from this call a few tactical ideas on our experience. And ideas for getting going, and perhaps even some connections with others that might be in the same boat or connections with us. So in this call, we will share what early college looks like in Massachusetts now, and we'll look backwards and forward. We will look backward at the key actions we believe have been most critical in our progress, and we'll look forward to what we believe are going to be the most critical elements to put in place from here. Our goal is to take early college from what is now a growing but still subscale initiative and thrust it forward to becoming large enough to make a substantive dent in really what are alarming and critical gaps in college attainment by race and income in Massachusetts. So I am joined today by two esteemed colleagues who will introduce themselves in a moment. Chairman Roy and Chairman Gabrieli, you both have made early college a real personal priority, and you've been instrumental in advocating for and bringing this initiative to life in Massachusetts. Chairman Roy, you have introduced bold legislation related to college and high school opportunities, and you have successfully doubled funding in the state budget this year alone for early college. Chair Gabrieli, you really were the reason this initiative kicked off 5 years ago, and you inspired the call to action and the ensuing systems and structures that support today's system. And you both put an immense amount of your personal and professional time into this work. So please, let's have you introduce yourselves, and Chairman Roy, maybe you could start us off.
Well, Erika, thank you very much for your kind words. It's so good to join you and Chairman Gabrieli at this program. Just briefly, I've been in the Massachusetts legislature now. I'm going into my 10th year. I currently serve as the chair of the Joint Committee on Telecommunications, Utilities, and Energy, which is dealing with a lot of the climate change issues. So it's a busy committee. Last session, I chaired the Joint Committee on Higher Education, which really brought me into close contact with Chair Gabrieli and Erika, and just have been delighted to work with both of them on the early college initiative and with the legislation I'll talk about later, how we want to expand this broadly for a college and high school experience across all 351 communities in Massachusetts.
Thank you. Good morning, Erika. Mr. Chair, it's one of the reasons it's been fun to work with you is Jeff Roy represents the community that is the birthplace of Horace Mann. And as such, as a personal sort of amateur historian, he has led, I think, recognition in his hometown of Horace Mann, but has also really invested in thinking about the spirit of the arguably one of the main progenitors of the modern American ideal of what we're trying to do in education. So it's been particularly fun to work together on something we both think, and Erika and others in Massachusetts, and probably all of you on this call, is another chapter, maybe not quite as grand as the basic common school, but the idea of a breakthrough approach to making college available far more successfully for far more students by really changing institutions, not just supporting our students. I'm fortunate enough to be the chair of the Massachusetts Board of Higher Ed in my 7th year in that role, appointed by our governor. I'm also a lecturer at the Harvard Grad School of Education. Most of my work at Empower Schools and elsewhere has been in K-12. So I've been newer to this higher ed space and maybe therefore also more comfortable with the idea of doing what's good for higher ed and for high schools by focusing on students.
That's great. Thank you both. And I have to do a quick shout out. Cheryl Rona, hi. If you can, I'm not sure if you're there at the moment, but Cheryl Rona is a school leader at a great early college high school and came to one of our recent community of practice meetings to share some best practices. So glad to see you here.
Glad to see you all.
Great. Well, I will jump in. I'm going to provide some basic context on early college in Massachusetts, and then Chair Gabrieli will look backward. We'll talk about the key actions that we believe have been most critical in our progress to this point. And then Chair Roy and I will look forward to what we believe are going to be the most critical elements to put in place from here. So first, some background. Like many of you, our program is targeted for students historically underrepresented in college. It's free of charge for students. Courses happen during the school day. They count for both high school and college credit, and they're intentionally sequenced to drive toward degrees. And of course, students receive wraparound services and support to help them to be successful. Most of our programs in Massachusetts are programs within schools, though we do have one wall-to-wall early college and plans for more on the horizon. Also to date, our programs are not located on college campuses, but this too is something that we're interested in exploring more with time. And like many of you, the early college work in Massachusetts is deeply rooted in equity and the equity imperative. Massachusetts is often cited as being first in the country when it comes to our highest achieving students, but we have staggering equity gaps in attainment for Black and Latinx students and students from lower income homes. The Massachusetts Board of Higher Education, as Chairman Gabrieli alluded to, has put forward an equity agenda to drive state policies and programs, and early college is among the very top on a short list of key initiatives there. And the impacts of COVID on college enrollments, especially in reducing college enrollments among our most underserved student populations, has only increased the urgency for that work. And here is that equity gap I mentioned earlier. As you can see, disparities start with high school graduation rates, but really accelerate at college, such that what starts as a 20 percentage point difference in high school graduation ends up a 3 times difference in college degrees. So whereas half of all the students from better off backgrounds will get a college degree within 6 years of high school graduation, fewer than 1 in 6 will if their parents were low income. That's some background. Chairman Gabrieli, I will turn to you now.
Thanks. And you're doing the advancing, Erika?
Yes.
Great, thanks. Yeah, so we know that this group has a lot of sophistication in this space, so we're looking forward to jumping into the dialogue with you, and we know others will be watching, on the recorded video as they rotate through sessions. So I'm going to move fairly quickly through these at a high level. We're happy, of course, to share the slides if anyone who wants to go in greater depth. This is a slide we often use just to talk about how early college came to be. There was a pioneering phase, and I see Stefano Davalos on, who was involved in some of the programs that existed in early, and that could be reasonably called early college before, this phase. And I call that pioneering, dating back in some cases probably decades, but none of it with a shaping public policy and not with kind of an overarching goal, just people doing the right thing in individual communities. In that case, I think more around the gateway model at community college campuses where Stephanie's work overlapped. Starting in January 2016, though, we began to ask, shouldn't our state have a strategic approach to this? And as our headline of our session talks about, we were lucky, and Erika, you acknowledged so well, to follow on the footsteps of some states like Texas and North Carolina and others, Indiana, et cetera, that had put together stronger, cases. So we worked on a public phase where we really put together an approach. We joined at our 2 boards, a Board of Higher Education, Board of K-12. We approved a designation with a set of criteria by which a joint venture of a college and a high school could get approved. We had a little bit of money to offer, not much. So the good news is a lot of people came forward, and over time we've expanded that designation. We've increased the number of people under it. We've worked to build a much broader coalition. And so we feel like we're moving from the sort of organizing phase, following on the pioneers, to a maturing phase. And some of what we want to talk with you today is, after some initial success, which we feel we've had, where do you go next? Something we've been thinking about a lot, and we're using this session as kind of an excuse to have some dialogue with you all on. So on the next slide, we just highlight that, we really started on the public side. And Erika's leading an increasing effort to bring together the many private players, funders, and nonprofits and others who are interested. But initially, we felt it was incumbent at the public side lay out a path forward. And so this state designation process to create both clarity of what we have in mind, not to speak poorly of any of the many other overlapping related ideas, but to say we wanted early college high schools that targeted low-income students, that provided robust supports, that created sequences of courses that were aligned to pathways where possible, that had a deep partnership between the college and the high school, strong supports, and held themselves accountable for real success. We also innovated with a joint governance approach where our two boards have a joint committee that actually has the authority of the two boards as we define those things. On the next slide, I highlight that this has gone well. We've been super pleased, probably similar in many of your states, that so many high schools and colleges, some of whom already were in an earlier form of this, and some of whom are new to the game, step forward. So we have 31 designated programs now that include 42 high schools, because some designations involve multiple high schools of a single district, 22 higher education institutions, including most of our community colleges, some of our state universities, and a handful of private colleges. And they have expanded fairly quickly to over 4,000 students this coming year, and persisted quite impressively despite the pandemic, in many cases actually doing better by students than traditional high school was at that time frame. So we're pleased with what we consider to be a major start. When Erika said earlier, not critical mass, we'll talk about how big would you have to be to matter, not to the individual student, but to the state as a whole. On the next slide, try to highlight that one thing we've done from the very beginning is put in place the ability to track the data in real time. Most public policy initiatives in education don't do that, so we're kind of proud that we got a private foundation to fund, the Smith Family Foundation, to fund a position at the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education for a data fellow who is well trained at Harvard and Brown, and who tracks the data quite closely from the beginning. And so this shows you some early data showing that in our first class to sort of graduate who count in this program, we've seen significant advantages. I'm happy to report the blue line is participants. That's the good news. And compared to appropriately matched students, they were both significantly more likely to matriculate to college promptly after high school, and significantly more likely to persist into a second year to boot. Just the kind of behavioral outcomes we seek with early college. Long way to go, but we're really pleased that in this pool of largely 2/3 Black and Latino students, about half economically disadvantaged by our kind of strict criteria of these days. No more free and reduced lunch line, but it's using the federal data links that we're seeing these outcomes. Next slide, please. And so over these past 5 years, we've also been very grateful that there's been this growing support from the public side. The legislature, particularly in the form of Chair Roy, but also on the Senate side and all the way up to the Speaker and Senate President and the Governor, have been, both in their actions and their words, generous. Governor's been particularly excited and talked about it. When you have a Republican governor in a dominantly Democratic legislature, it's good to have his cheering, but you certainly don't want to associate with any individual, any party, and like many cases, it's really quite bipartisan. The two commissioners have really prioritized it on both sides, and the legislature has put some money where it matters. And so you can see increasing funding in each year for state funding, doubled into this fiscal year, which has allowed us to continue to really support the programs, and I think given people great encouragement. And again, I want to thank Chair Roy, who's been, I think, at the center of the actual action where that happens in discussion. So that has also, given us that feel. So as we look ahead on the next slide, we feel like we're approaching an inflection point or at an inflection point. On the public sector side, we need to continue just to grow the capabilities to keep up with these number of programs, to continue to increase the annual funding, This year, with funding at the central level, we are investing significantly in multiple approaches to innovation and growth that go beyond just the designations. For example, using both state money and federal ESSER money, we are challenging the state to come up with at least 5 wall-to-wall schools. We only have 1 in the state right now. We think that's a powerful model. We don't think it's the only one. We're really glad that so many comprehensive high schools have laid in a program, but we'd like to also see more wall-to-walls. That's just one example. And very importantly, and we'll talk about that in a moment, we think fundamental enabling legislation that really sets the long-term parameters beyond the actions of any administrative set of bodies like my board is important. And Chair Roy is the author of that legislation as it's pending, and he'll talk about that in a minute. On the private side, Erika is leading the launch of a new collective impact alliance, and she's going to talk more about that. We've had some private funders who've been funding planning and development and other elements. We've had some important nonprofits, think tanks, and advocacy groups who've spoken out clearly, but we now feel the need to sort of knit that together so that there's a clear private side to what could be called a public-private partnership in the time ahead. So with that intro from my perspective, I'm going to flip it over to my friend and colleague, Jeff Roy, to talk about the legislation he's drafted along with others, to give you a flavor of how a legislator thinks about this and any other pieces he wants to talk about. And then Erika will close out talking about our private side, and we'll jump into the discussion with you all. Thank you, Mr. Roy, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Chris. That was a great history of where we've been, and it's nice to hear that we have reached that inflection point, which I think will give us the momentum that we need to get the tools in place to really make this program grow. And together with some colleagues, I filed House 693, which is an act to promote college and high schools. And we looked across the spectrum at what offerings were out there in our schools in Massachusetts, and we saw early college as a program, advanced placement and IB courses, dual enrollment, industry recognized credentialing, and innovation pathways as some of the tools that are in our high schools today. But it's a loosely organized set of tools that are out there. And we really wanted to get some legislation together that is grounded in the belief that we have to expand these programs to all 351 communities in the Commonwealth. We have to take advantage of the 106 institutions of higher education that we have in the Commonwealth, and try to develop a process for utilizing all these great resources that we have in Massachusetts to build a really strong college and high school program. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see that what we have done is, we've recognized, first of all, that in Massachusetts, it's around 72% of all of the jobs require some sort of a credential beyond a high school diploma. And if you look at this as an equity piece, by not giving folks an opportunity to get some sort of a post-high school experience, they're going to be behind. They, as you can see, without a college degree, they earn $22,000 less annually. And we need to bridge that equity gap. And how we can do it, we have established early college, and I think all of the data that Chair Gabrieli has shown you is that this is probably the best effort at bridging that equity gap. So how are we going to do that? So under the legislation that we have proposed, understand that we have a Department of Elementary and Secondary Education that deals with students from K to 12. And we also have a Department of Higher Education that deals with all our higher education programs. And, those are two silos. And I'm glad that they have a unified early college group that is trying to utilize both agencies to the best of their ability. But what we thought, establishing a new centralized college and high school office charged with defining and implementing all of the college and high school programs that I talked about earlier, would be vital to the success of this program. And, we wanted to provide programmatic implementation guidance, oversight, and more importantly, accountability that ensures students access, integrity, and ensures the rigor of all of these college and high school programs. The legislation also encourages students to complete and submit a FAFSA application at the federal level, and also our local financial aid piece to get them on the road to thinking about a post-secondary experience. And finally, the bill talks about ensuring adequate and sustainable funding for all of the costs to the school districts. We understand and believe that there are expenses associated with this, but the economic benefits that come with a early college experience or a college and high school experience certainly outweigh the costs that we're going to pay up front. I think the next slide has a great statistic on, nope, I missed it. There it is. The Mass Taxpayers Foundation estimates that if Blacks and Hispanics graduated from college at the same rate as their white peers, the economic activity would exceed $6 billion over the first 5 years for the Commonwealth. And that swells to more than $20 billion over 10 years. I'm confident that the program that we are talking about through H693 is not going to cost that much, but the economic returns are incredible. So if you look at it from an economic standpoint, it makes a lot of sense. But if you look at it from an equity standpoint, it's something that we must do. And as Chris had noted earlier, it's not enviable to be in the position of catching up, but we appreciate all the great work that has been done throughout many of the states in the United States. And we're learning from the work that you did, and took some of those great ideas and incorporated them into this legislation. So that's where we're heading. I was telling the folks earlier that, I'm looking now at offshore wind and looking at creating a new industry here in Massachusetts and looking at a skills gap. And one of the ways that you bridge skills gaps is through introducing students to these particular types of careers in industries at an early point in their career. And I'm actually having conversations with folks about incorporating our college and high school legislation into an offshore wind package. Not sure whether that will be successful, but it just goes to show you how important this type of legislation is to reaching economic and equity goals in any state, and particularly here in Massachusetts. So with that, let me turn it back over to Erika.
Great. Thank you, Chair Roy, for those comments and for everything that you're doing. So I'll talk a little bit about this alliance that we mentioned. This is all about complementing those efforts that Chairman Roy and Chairman Gabrieli are leading on the public side. We are readying to launch the Massachusetts Alliance for Early College, probably in the coming months. And you can see listed here some of the organizations, leading think tank, business groups, equity-focused community organizations, and philanthropists. We have been working together in an informal collaboration in the past couple of years, and we're now taking this to a more formal alliance. And the reason we're doing this is really about collective impact. We know that we can achieve more when we work together. The Alliance will be a way to really catalyze our impact as a collection of organizations and individuals who care deeply about the same problem. The Alliance will act as the backbone of this effort, providing coordination and capacity for the group. And we will work across advocacy efforts, quality efforts, technical assistance, and community engagement in particular. And we're going to do something that we think is incredibly important now. And that's about establishing a shared and bold goal. And this is what I'm going to focus on for the next few slides. It's not possible for us, a small entity, to do everything it takes to grow early college the way we think it needs to be done in Massachusetts, but we can help to activate and harness the energy of these groups around a big goal. So I want to talk about that goal. Earlier this year, Mass Inc., our leading policy think tank, published this report. And in this report, they called for adoption of a big goal: 45,000 students in Massachusetts doing early college. We think this is a critically important goal, and we think that we in the Alliance have an important job to do highlighting this goal and gaining buy-in and ownership of this goal across the many relevant sectors: higher education, K-12, business, etc. And I want to give you a sense of what this goal would mean for Massachusetts. These bars show you our scale. This is looking at seniors right now. To simplify here, just looking at seniors, grade 12 across Massachusetts. On the left, 70,000 current 12th graders. Roughly a third of them are Black or Latinx. In the middle here, you can see the scale goal that was called for in the Mass Inc. report. It translates to roughly 11,000 seniors doing early college. And currently in early college, 2/3 of early college students are Black or Latinx, and we'd want to maintain at least that ratio as we grow. So as you can see in the middle column, this is what we want to achieve. And on the right is where we are now. Something like 3,000 or 4,000 students in early college programs. Chris talked through those numbers earlier. We wanted a goal that was both highly ambitious so that we would have the ability to motivate bold action, and to be reasonably feasible so that we can imagine what it would take to achieve it and put those steps in motion. This goal is highly ambitious. It is consistent with closing 1/4 to 1/3 of the college success equity gap overall for the state by race and income, and it will benefit many thousands of students beyond that. So it's highly ambitious and it's reasonably feasible. This goal represents serving 15% of all seniors in Massachusetts. That goal feels feasible given that 64% of all of our seniors go on to start college now. And it's roughly 6 times the current number of seniors that are currently in early college. So we think this is both ambitious and feasible, a really important needle to thread. I want to peel back the layers of this onion even more. The last slide showed all seniors across Massachusetts, and this slide focuses on our Black and Latinx seniors. There are about 22,000 Black and Latinx seniors in Massachusetts, and at our scale goal, 1/3 of them will be in early college. And they will constitute 2/3 of the early college population as they do now. So this is 1/3 of all Black and Latinx students in Massachusetts accessing early college programs. And it's particularly important when you match that with how these programs are currently doing in terms of outcomes. The scale figures here, when you match it with what you see when it comes to degree attainment, you see here degree attainment. In gray are the rates you saw earlier. Half of white students are going on to gain their college degree, and only 20% of Black and Latinx students are doing the same. Early college students are projected to earn degrees at 42%. So those students are closing the attainment gap by 75%. So 1/3 of all Black and Latinx students in Massachusetts accessing early college programs that are closing the attainment gap by 70%. This obviously has significant impact for those students in particular and makes a substantive dent in the overall equity gap for the state of Massachusetts. And that's what you see here. Early college at scale would close 1/4 of the overall degree attainment gap by race for the state. That effect that we saw is so large that even though early college would only really directly support 30% of all those Black and Latinx students, it would reduce the statewide gap for all Black and Latinx students, whether they're in early college or not, by 1/4. And that's the kind of goal that is driving our work in the Alliance and that we believe can help to catalyze the various players in our ecosystem towards bold action. So I'll close our presentation by naming what's taking the majority of my mind share these days. Okay, that's a meaningful goal. So what do we do with it? Who needs to believe in this goal? And what actions can we as the Alliance do, and as the state overall do to collectively achieve it? We will be engaging high school and district leaders, higher ed leaders, business leaders, community and stakeholder groups, policymakers around the moral imperative that this goal implies, and looking to them to take the bold action necessary to achieve it. We will also be developing strategies on the how. How do we achieve this? What do we do to get there? But what I will say is that 62% of Black and Latinx low-income students currently attend 50 high schools in Massachusetts. There's an immense concentration of need. Half of the scale goal can be achieved by reaching 1/3 of those students. And we believe we can achieve the other half through tools like online and regional programs to make early college more accessible even outside of those schools. So that's a little bit about where we've been, where we are going, and it concludes the speaking portion of this presentation. We would love to open the floor to all of you in the audience, either to share reactions to this or reflections on your own state's progress or questions for any of us, and are so grateful that you all are here with us today. Please.
My name is Tony. I'm in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and I want to commend the team on the work that's been done around collaboration and communication. And clearly the foundation you have put in place is remarkable, and it will be a source of strength as you take the important steps that you've laid out here. So congratulations for all of that. I wanted to share with you that as one of the architects of the North Carolina Early College program, this is like a beautiful presentation. We took so many teachers and policymakers to Massachusetts for conversations in Worcester and other communities as the North Carolina Early College initiative was being designed. So I think I feel like I need to say thank you and to applaud all at the same time. Because time is short, if I could offer just two quick sort of reactions, and I can put other things in an email if that would be useful. I think the conversation around place-based early college is always challenging, and it's easy to see why you chose to go with existing schools and programs within those schools. The strength of place-based early college to inspire and demonstrate change on a much broader scale is very, very valuable. But I say that knowing and having participated in creating so many university and community college-based schools, the amount of energy and facilitation that's required. And Erika, I'm impressed by what clearly seems to be a facilitative strength in your work, but that's a key component, I think, for the larger equation. And then to try to be brief here and shut up and let other people talk. I think the notion of designing a school versus achieving clarity and consistency around instruction that motivates and supports children to perform at much higher levels is a very, very important component. And as we were designing early college in North Carolina and refining and improving and failing and improving, we visited Texas and so many other states, in the places that lacked a coherent and consistent framework around instruction did not do as well. And one state with great friends let 1,000 flowers bloom, and everyone did their own thing with regard to what is good teaching and learning. And that taught us in very concrete ways that we needed to go very, very deep on consistency around what is the meaning of rigor and student engagement and supports that make those things possible. And then the last thing before I shut up, I'll say that Paul Revel's been a long-term friend, or was a long-term friend in Massachusetts, and your state has had an amazing history of quality leadership that obviously continues today. So congratulations.
Tony, a couple comments from me. And first of all, thank you for what you did in North Carolina, the path that you and others, led. Obviously, for example, created the atmosphere where we could have the kind of randomized controlled trial data that Julie Edmonds, so involved in this conference, has been able to put forward that certainly helped us to have our own, confidence and to be able to share with Chair Roy and many other people as we were learning all together, why would we believe this could happen? And so we thank you. North Carolina, along with Texas, I think, deserve probably the greatest lion's share of gratitude for state level, thinking, even as there have been many other wonderful examples around the country. Your point about place-based, something Chair Roy, and I need to talk some more about, and Erika and all of our other colleagues, I think by that you mean like campus-based,
Yes.
wall-to-wall, dedicated, every student opting in is going to early college, right? Versus here, where you mentioned Worcester University Park, I think is the school so many people visited back in the day when Massachusetts was leading a little bit on this in a very pioneering moment. Where Worcester has all of its high schools engaged now, but none of them wall to wall. University Park, just one of them. So there's relatively small shares of all the students at each of those schools in a more programmatic structure. And there are positives to that in terms of the ubiquity of access, and negatives in terms of the ability, among other things in my mind, to focus on that rigor of instruction, as you point out. The one wall to wall we have, everybody in the whole building is focused on students getting to and through college success, versus it's one of the many things going on at that high school. So it's a balance. We look forward to learning more. And I think I certainly be interested in, your perspectives, right? How to do both. Like, how do you have a mixed delivery system so that we can get some wall to walls, but we don't exclude the many communities that I think wouldn't participate if they had to be wall to wall. North Carolina, with your 117 counties, I think some number like that, and every single one of them, I think, has, 117 community colleges and counties, some number like that, right? And every one of them has I think, an early college, or almost every single one.
But
It's kind of a unique structure, right?
your comment is, I think, spot on. It's about a constellation of solutions. And what you were saying is the importance of everyone having access. And I think there are multiple designs to achieve that access, and different designs, whether it's place-based or in a conventional school, serve different purposes, and each of them important. So I didn't want to overstate that. So thanks for sharing that.
Erika or Chair Roy, I didn't mean to jump in. I just am so intrigued. Separately, it might be, I know we just got another question in the chat, so don't want it to bog down too much here, but we come back. But I'm also super interested in the issue about a fifth year, which has been a critical piece, I believe, the North Carolina design. We're experimenting a little bit with it in Massachusetts, but it would be a bigger shift for sure for us. So that's another, I think, design feature that's, non-trivial, right? Is do you try to cram it in 4 years as they do in Texas? Or do you say with a fifth year, so much can be done? Erika, I jumped in. I got so excited. I apologize. I think you're our moderator. So let me step back and let you lead.
Thank you for that. No, I'm so intrigued by all of that conversation. And Tony, thank you so much for those comments. Like Chris said, we really have been watching North Carolina, and I know you were the architect of so much of that. So appreciate your comments and giving us some good things to think about. And I know, Dina, I think you were actually going to facilitate us in terms of the questions. I'm happy also just to kind of get into it. I know we've got
not at all. If you don't need me, I'm happy to just sit back.
Okay, we've got a question here from Alice, I believe. Is there a teacher shortage issue for early college in Massachusetts? I'll provide a quick thought on this, and please, Chair Roy or Gabrieli, feel free to add. Right now, we don't, at large scale across the system, have a teacher shortage issue. That's partially due to the fact that we have several different models in place. Most of our programs are doing cohorted classes at a college where the professor is teaching that course. There are some cases where the high school teacher is sort of getting the necessary certification to teach the course, but it's happening a little less than it's happening in a lot of other states. So I can't say that there is a teacher shortage issue. Please, others, feel free to add in here, or Alice, for you to add to that question if there's any thoughts that makes you have, or questions for the group.
I would just piggyback on that and make note that, I don't see a teacher shortage issue right now. The program is not huge at this point, but as it grows, we're certainly cognizant of that being an issue. And I think part of the legislation that we propose is not so much a certification, but a type of credentialing to make sure that we have the appropriate types of folks in these classrooms. And we also have to deal with, many of our K-12s are in teachers' unions, so we have to get over those types of issues. And so something that's on our mind, but I would not say it's a shortage now, but if we grow this thing the way we want to grow it, it may be something we face down the road.
Alice, does that answer your question? Any follow-up on that? Yes, got your text, your chat there. And Stephanie, I know I saw you come on video a moment ago. I didn't know if you had anything that you wanted to add or ask.
I'm just, really proud of your work in Massachusetts and how, the Gateway to College model, which has had such really wonderful success serving opportunity youth, off track students coming in with a 1.3 to 1.6 GPA. And then we're now at about 75% of those students earning a high school diploma in our Massachusetts programs. And I'm thrilled too to hear your vision to expand this, right? And to have that department, Chairman Roy, that would be focused on early college and be a broader net and a set of accountability structures for all of the different models. But I'm just so impressed by the designation. I think I was a little skeptical in the beginning, having been so close to the Gateway model. The New Heights example, our one wall-to-wall, is just a thrilling example in Brockton of how you are making equity real and creating whole new systems for this work and for Black and Brown students in Massachusetts, where we have shocking equity gaps. And we have a proof point in our Gateway programs, which you acknowledged that every student can do this if we provide the right supports and the right structures and get the systems out of the way. And if we truly create those collaborative ties between K-12 and community colleges and get the instruction right. And I do think that is a critical piece. Our most successful programs have right fit faculty who know how to work with vulnerable youth and inspire them and provide that scaffolded support to get everyone to where they need to be. And that's what equity really is in practice, is when you provide those supports. So I'm just excited for what's to come here, and happy to, be in a role where I've got now this national perspective with Achieving the Dream, and hoping we can help you and our colleagues across the state expand and get to the scale that you're aspiring to.
Stephanie, one thing you brought up in your online comments that I'm particularly intrigued by, and I think North Carolina has some examples. I don't know whether folks from other states can speak to this as well, is the idea, what I think that this early college idea opens up a lot of design ideas, right? And certainly it was a really original design idea to have a high school sited on a college campus and run in partnership with a college back when that model was really coming forward. And that's certainly one example. Another one that I'm really intrigued by is the opportunity for early college to help address the need for more teachers of color, more diverse teacher force. That has gained a certain momentum. I think, Chair Roy, there's been some legislative proposals, to fund just that one element. And I understand why. Here you've got students in high school. We're mostly targeting students where the students are of color, and the opportunity to draw the right ones, not to make anyone do anything they don't want to do, but draw the right ones into thinking about teaching as a career and put them in a position to have earned potentially a significant first credential even before they graduate high school on the way towards a full teaching credential. I'm curious whether there's experience, on this call from anyone around that. It strikes me as a good example of a design goal that, is more specific. I know there are also lots of people doing STEM oriented early college high schools. And, they're obviously, as you point out, Stephanie, the gateways are focusing on students who were at risk or had actually already dropped out of high school. And it turned out largely because of the, so there's so many different, largely because of the sort of limits of high school as an enticing place for the full range of students who actually show up, right? So the students doing really well has shown that different environment, those students can thrive. So I'm curious about that design, whether anyone has strong feelings about it as a strategy for teacher diversification.
I know, I know Westfield State, back when I worked in Holyoke, was working on a partnership with Holyoke Public Schools and Springfield Public Schools to have a early college designation. I don't know if they got the designation, but to have a teacher focused, teacher training, teacher preparation, education focused pathway. And I'm not sure where that is in its evolution, but I know that was an idea 5 years ago.
Yeah, there are a couple of those. I see Tony coming off. Has North Carolina got some history with that?
Yeah, I was thinking about the dean at the UNC Charlotte campus was very intent on creating an early college focused on teacher development. The school had initially created a very successful early college focused on STEM careers because of their engineering school. And what they realized is that when teachers were coming through and doing peer observation in those classrooms, and aspiring teachers were doing peer observation, that it really motivated them to want to commit to these kids who are being served in this environment. And that inspired the creation of the second early college there. So I haven't talked to them in a couple of years, but it might be a site for investigation.
Great to know.
Sure, Roy. I wonder, as you think from the legislative point of view, if there are any questions you're thinking about that you see as dilemmas that whether it's Tony or others from other states might share back, because we're in the spirit of learning as well as trying to pioneer.
Yeah, and it's one of the reasons I was anxious to attend this particular program and join you is to learn from what's happening out there. I'm curious about how you were able to bridge the silos between a K-12 and a higher ed program. That's something that sits with me, and we struggled with where to set up this entity, whether we should set it up in DESE or set it up in the Department of Higher Education. We landed on the K-12, but that's not set in stone. Would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Chair Roy, was that question specifically for Tony or anyone on the call?
Anyone on the call, I would love to hear thoughts.
You said the word learning, and it made me chuckle because in this particular work, the learning never stops. And the specific answer, I think, to your question from my experience, it depends upon the context of the college or the university. So, for example, at NC State University, which is one of the prestige campuses here in North Carolina, it took 6 years of planning and facilitation for an early college there to open, focused on creativity and STEM. However, a rural community college sometimes is so desperate for collaboration in students, that process can go more quickly. So in my experience, every single post-secondary culture is unique and different based on economics and context. And so it's an individualized answer, I think.
And Tony, at state government, who, I know there's the Cooperative Innovative High School program is the home for early college. Who administers that?
Within the Department of Public Instruction. So,
Is that so within K-12?
That's right, yes. Department of Public Instruction.
And that sits okay with the higher ed folk, or doesn't really matter?
In the collaboration and communication never ends.
You got a future in politics yourself, sir.
Or is that learning? The learning never ends, right? Just when you think you have an answer, you wake up one day and everything's a mess.
Dina, I just see that you just came off mute. Were you letting us know that we're almost at time?
Yes, that's exactly it.
Well, thank
But
you
this has
all.
been just absolutely wonderful discussion. So happy to be a part of this today.
Great job, people. That was fun.
This was fun. Tony, thank you so much. And thank you to everyone else for being here, and looking forward to more times for our paths to cross.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Take care, all.
Bye.
Have a great day.